Desire is irrelevant. I am a machine. The immortal words, of course, of Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 3, a movie that I think gets a bad rap, that it doesn't deserve. I really think that the reputation for that, it was a good film, goddammit. I mean, and not that I have a problem with Mick G., but it was certainly better than Terminator Salvation. Well, at least in my opinion. I don't know. Terminator Salvation was good too. I saw an awesome interview with Mick G. recently on Collider, where he was talking about all kinds of stuff, including the Masters of the Universe movie that he never really got to make. But, he kind of admitted, he said that there's a lot of deleted scenes that and ideas. So amazingly, okay, we're going to talk about Star Trek, but what the fuck? We opened it up with the fact that, holy shit, how do I make this all go round and round? I don't know. Really, it's because of you, the patrons. The patrons, you give me, you lift me up when, I don't know, how does that song go? And that wasn't a serious attempt at singing. But you're the wind beneath my wings, I got to tell you. Okay? Yeah, I mean it. You really are. You have no idea the times you've gotten me through. So anyway, Mick G, he was talking about, what's that guy's name? Steve something, who runs Frosty over there at Collider. Anyway, they were interviewing each other, and Mick G was saying, he says there's scenes that nobody has had the opportunity to check out that would have allowed the movie to make a little more sense that weren't in there, and he appreciated what everybody had to say about why the movie didn't make sense. He said he wished he had an entire trilogy mapped out, and he actually has, it sounded like nearly complete scripts for where he was going to go with kind of what I guess you could call the Terminator Salvation trilogy. Now, of course, J. Michael Straczynski of Babylon 5 fame, he wrote a lot of kind of sequel stuff to, I think, Salvation and some others in comic book form. It was I think it was for Dynamite. I don't think it was for IDW, even though Dark Horse traditionally had the license for Terminator for so long. And you had all those classic crossovers between, Alien and RoboCop and Predator and Terminator. I mean, those are absolute classics, of the genre, the original crossovers that just did so goddamn well. But anyway, I would love to know what Mick G had in mind, what we haven't seen and all that, because I'm not so harsh on these. And Genesis, I loved Terminator Genesis. What the fuck? I'm glad that Cameron's going to end up doing something, that's fine. I don't know how the hell that's going to turn out, because it's not like he's been doing his best work lately. Not that I'm kind of a fan of Avatar. I get it. I know it was a copy of a Paul Anderson work and all that. But I can appreciate it very much for what it is and what it had going on. And certainly one hell of a soundtrack. I mean, just one of the most brilliant soundtracks, I've ever heard. But anyway, we're not here to talk about all that. We're here to talk about one of my favorite subjects ever. We're going to talk about some Star Trek, baby. Woo! And we've got a lot to cover. The entire month of October, of course, I do Star Trek updates and Star Wars updates. And who knows, maybe there will be Stargate updates at some point. We'll see. I recently signed up for StargateCommand.co. That's a website, and it's a streaming service that's Stargate only. In the Sovereign Tech newsletter that should be out around the time that this episode gets released, you can read more about my thoughts on that, so I'm not going to get into that here, but that is a very real thing. And I will just say, I'm not entirely negative on it, and we got a nice little look at a production clip for Stargate Origins, like this little 10-minute prequel web series that I think could fit. Think Torment of Tantalus and all that. I really think it could fit. Anyway, like I said, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Star Trek. goddammit! So let's talk about Star Trek. And of course, we're going to talk about Star Trek Discovery. We're going to get into a couple of other interesting little tidbits as well. So last time we did the Star Trek update, which was at the just like this, it was at the very end, the very, very end of September, which gave me effectively the opportunity to watch the 2-hour pilot, or the 2 episodes that comprised the pilot. That was, what was it, the Vulcan Hello, and then it was a Battle of the Binary Stars, I believe, or Battle at the Binary Stars. So we got to talk about both of those. And I made the point then, and we also talked about David Mack's phenomenal book, Desperate Hours, that really allows for all of this, for all of Discovery to make sense within the larger canon. And I talked all about that, and it really does. So we did get to talk about a little bit on a Sovereign Tech Prime episode. We talked about, my review of Discovery briefly. And because at the end of the last Star Trek update we did for Patreon, this is a Patreon-only perk, or a patron-only perk, I said, look, this show could end up being a completely different show after those first 2 episodes, because those first 2 episodes are very much a prequel to the actual series that we are now enjoying, or at least some of us are enjoying. And as I said on the Sovereign Tech Prime review that came after that, I said, you know what, actually, the show's doing fine, because I was worried that we could end up okay, so I loved the first 2 episodes, but then every episode after that could have been pure shit. I think it's knocking it out of the park. I think it's doing tremendous work. I think that this is really, really cool Star Trek. Now, the convenience of doing this now is that we just got done. If you are up to date, and look, if you haven't watched the episodes up to date yet, stop this and go watch the episodes, okay? Because I'm not going to hold back. There's spoilers abound. There's some speculative spoilers that have to do with things we haven't seen yet that I will talk about, but I'll warn you when those come up. So anyway, just last night I watched, what was it? The Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, I think was the title of it. It was episode 7, which had to do, centered largely around Stamets. Of course, Paul Stamets, the kind of the chief engineer, the guy who's behind the Dash drive, as they're calling it. And what Dash stands for, I thought, it's amazing how much that fucking acronym gets used. But that's the name for the mushroom drive that's going around. But they call it the Dash. I know the H stands for hub, but what does the DAS stand for? Oh, right. It's Displacement Activated Spore Hub. So it's called the Dash drive, even though they've used a couple other terms. The Spore drive is what it generally just gets called. But that's it, the Dash drive, Displacement Activated Spore Hub, which we might talk about that in a bit, because Forbes put out this, what I can only think is just clickbait and just bullshit. I mean, it's some of the worst internet journalism I've seen in a long time, where they were complaining about the Spore drive, about the Dash drive. And because it's completely unscientific and it got science so wrong, and it's just like, what the hell are you? Well, we'll save it. We'll talk about that later. So anyway, the episode 7 that I was talking about with that centered a lot on Stamets, and of course the newer character of Ash Tyler and Michael Burnham, and kind of their burgeoning romance. A lot of people have been talking about episode 7 saying, okay, this feels like Star Trek. This is good Star Trek, because it's like a time loop episode. Of course, Harry Mudd's in it and everything. And boy, that Andorian space helmet he was wearing, that was fucking awesome. that was so great. I even commented about it on the Star Trek Reddit. I was just like, come on, we all had to love that fucking helmet. That was the best thing when you see that walking out. Oh, anyway. So, well, if you can't tell, I've been enjoying the fuck out of every episode of this show. I have watched, Stephanie and I, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I, have been watching every episode over and over again. Like literally we'll watch them 2 or 3 times a week, because we're just so much enjoying this show and what they're doing with this show. I really love it. Okay. Now, without getting into a lot of, I don't know if it's even worthwhile ranking these. Of course, we only have 2 more episodes left, episode 8 and 9, until, which will be in November, until we get a mid-season break, and it doesn't come back until January, which, yeah, that sucks, but whatever. I'll wait. I have some theories as to why there's even a mid-season break in the first place. Because part of it is to, assuage, the fact that you're going to have to wait until 2019 for season 2, which, by the way, season 2 is confirmed. We're getting a season 2. I didn't hear an episode count, but season 2 is absolutely confirmed. But before I get into that, into why I think that wait is happening, I don't want to do a review of every episode here. Maybe in November that would be worthwhile to give a full commentary on the entire first half of the first season. So, but yeah, I've enjoyed every episode. I think everything, and I know there's a lot of comments about, particularly, I don't think it was in Choose Your Pain, or yeah, I think it was in the episode Choose Your Pain, where the F word, the F bomb was dropped twice. They said fuck, and everybody was flipping out saying, this isn't my Star Trek. Da, 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 da. This is the most common complaint that I'm hearing about Discovery overall, is that it doesn't feel like Star Trek. It's not Star Trek. I don't know what show people are watching. It feels perfectly very much like Star Trek to me. And they are paying homage to, like I said in my review on the Sovryn Tech Prime episode, this is really, they're doing this mishmash of 70s and maybe even like kind of 80s science fiction. They're doing the Philadelphia experiment. They're doing, of course, the other one that I mentioned constantly, actually, in my Prime review, the Andromeda Strain. Like, they're doing all of these, and even they're borrowing so much from Star Trek the Motion Picture, It's almost insulting in a way. Like, it's almost too much Star Trek. But that's the thing. I think that's why people are saying it doesn't feel like Star Trek, because it's borrowing from, in fact, the other source material of Star Trek that it's borrowing a ton from? It's borrowing a ton from the animated series, like nonstop. Every episode, there's like 3 or 4 references to some shit that happens in the animated series, which I think is great. I love the animated series. I know Gene Roddenberry never really said it was canon. CBS and Paramount can come out and just say that shit's canon already. I mean, I'd be totally on board with that. Because, I mean, even other shows, Enterprise would reference the animated series. I mean, it's such a rich few episodes really to take from. I mean, understand, Star Trek the Animated Series won Emmys. It's no joke. I mean, it's more celebrated than the original series, by the elite of Hollywood, in a more or less. I mean, yeah, I know, walks of fame and everything that all the actors get and all of that, and City on the Edge Forever is considered such a great, hour of television, not just of Star Trek, which I completely agree with, of course. Praise be to Harlan Ellison. But yeah, the animated series is good stuff, and it's really cool to get so many references to what happens in it and what's in it and all that. I think that's slick. So I think a lot of people, though, don't know that Star Trek. They never liked the motion picture, so they don't pay attention to it, and they don't see the visual cues and the tonal cues that are happening in Discovery. They don't know the animated series, so they're not able to appreciate a lot of kind of the wackiness that the animated series could bring into Star Trek because it was animated, And I say wackiness with respect, meaning that you could go beyond the forehead of the month or the forehead of the week, as they would call it, where, you just gave a guy some kind of alien makeup on their forehead, and then they were a completely different race, which kind of became a trope, which is one of the things that, like, Babylon 5 broke out of, where aliens weren't just a forehead of the week anymore. They were a big deal, and they looked very different often enough. They weren't always bipedal. But anyway, so I think they're hitting at a lot of Star Trek. The other thing they're hitting at, I mean, there's a lot of Enterprise. Like, they're really, really touching on a lot of stuff that would go down in Enterprise, and some of the tone of Enterprise, which is another version of, another part of Star Trek's history that a lot of people just didn't give a shit about. So yeah, if you're, and now, yes, there are hardcore Star Trek fans that have issues with what's going on in Discovery, and I mean, no disrespect to you, because I know you know your shit, okay? But I'm just saying, the way I'm looking at it, this is what they're hitting on. They're hitting on the elements of Star Trek that, honestly, a lot of people don't really know. Like, a lot of people didn't watch Enterprise, or they just disliked Enterprise, which is sad, because it's a fucking awesome show, especially season 4. And so I think what they were trying to do is, and also they borrowed a ton from the novels. So if you're a novel reader, we might talk a little bit about that in a minute too. If you're a fan of the novels, you're in for a real treat with a lot of that. So anyway, I think they're borrowing from a lot of established Star Trek history to give it that Star Trek feel. And it's areas of Star Trek where you can kind of expand upon, that and that are relevant, because it's more in the time frame, say that it happened in the 22nd or 23rd century as compared to the 24th, even though there's plenty of references to what happens in the 24th century. yeah, I think they're doing so much work to try and tell people, no, this is Star Trek. This is your prime timeline. This is stuff that, makes sense in the canon, that we're going to borrow from the canon. We're going to show you that we know what the hell we're talking about, that we're really Star Trek fans here and all of this. And I just can't believe they're not getting the respect for that. I don't know what the fuck's going on. Like, I mean, I notice a lot of the stuff. If you don't notice it, there's a site called TrekCore. It's probably my favorite Trek news site. A site called TrekCore. And every week they put up a post where it shows everything that they can find as far as references to the broader canon and where it comes from. I mean, there's shit from Deep Space Nine, from Voyager, all over the place. So yeah, now if you feel like tonally that it has a different edge to it, well, I'm okay with that too, because we're seeing a darker side of Starfleet here. We're seeing more of this is the only thing I could compare it to is like a Starfleet, sort of like Star Trek Nemesis. Now, a lot of people don't like Star Trek Nemesis. I thought it was fantastic. When Star Trek Nemesis, which is the last Next Generation film, okay, that came out, what was that, 2002? When that came out, I remember seeing the trailers for it first. And when I watched the trailers for it, I was excited. I was like, yes, yeah, give me this really, like, it looks so dark. I was like, give me a dark, serious Star Trek. Like, it looked like, really terrible things seemed like they were going to happen and everything. And so I've wanted that for a while. I've wanted an edgy, much edgier Star Trek. Now, if you don't want an edgier Star Trek, well, then I guess that maybe this show isn't for you. And, that does bring up one thing. I mean, I don't think there's any way that there wasn't going to be people that hated the show. There just wasn't any way. It's just like Star Wars. It's the same thing where when Disney rebooted the canon in 2014 officially, they announced it in 2013, but when they officially did it in 2014, you had so many people mad that the expanded universe was no longer a thing. Okay. And I'll be doing a Star Wars update in the next 24 hours, where I will talk about some of this, because I do have my concerns about where Disney's going with this, as to where, honestly, a few months ago, I didn't have any concerns with where Disney was going with the new canon, with the new expanded universe that they were building, because I thought that they were doing great work. I don't necessarily feel that way now. Not exactly that way now anyway, but I'll save all that nuance, and there's a lot of nuance for another Patreon episode. So, but I think a similar split is happening here. Pretty much you have people that, unless you're going to do a show that is post-Voyager, they don't care. They don't want to hear about it. If it's not in the 24th century, they don't want anything to do with it. And that's really what you have. And so I think that's the deal. It's the same thing where, oh no, you fucked with my canon, or you're not putting the show where I want it. So fuck you. I don't care how good it is, what you make. I'm just going to hate it because you're not doing what I want. Now, the easy solution for this is really make 2 Star Trek shows. Like, make another show. Have Discovery run. I mean, CBS All Access has all the room in the world for this. Have Discovery, and then have another show, and maybe it's a show that takes place after Voyager, or is in some kind of time frame that people are okay with. And I think that would assuage a lot of this, and then people could take the heat off of Discovery and let Discovery be the Section 31 show that it needs to be, or that I think it's trying to be, and that's fucking okay with me. Please, I'm so on board for a Section 31 show, and like one of my favorite character. Still, I know the captain's not the central character, and look, I think Michael Burnham is such an awesome character. What's her name? Sonequa Martin Green. She lights up the camera. She's phenomenal. But Jason Isaacs is Captain Lorca. I love Captain Lorca. This character is so cool. I mean, yeah, he's the bad guy, but so the fuck what? You can enjoy bad guys. I think he is absolute dynamite. I am glad he is not like other Starfleet captains. And there's precedent for this, because that's an argument that I've also heard from some fans, is that, well, but Starfleet captains are supposed to be the shining light and all this stuff. It's like, what are you talking about? Matt Decker was nuts. Garth Avizar went nuts. I mean, you have a huge history of Starfleet captains that lose their mind. What about the captain in the Omega Glory? Or the captain of the ship in what was it, Bread and Circuses, right? I mean, like, this happens all the time where Starfleet, especially in the original series, where Starfleet captains, fucking either lose their minds, or, they drop their integrity, they check their integrity at the turbo lift. I don't know what the hell people are talking about saying this doesn't fit in with Star Trek. It fits in perfectly fine. I can make the case across the board of where it fits in. Now, I mean, there's things I'm with you that I don't like. Okay. I don't like I'm not a big fan of what they've been doing with the Klingons. I think that's kind of horseshit. Fine. I'm totally with you there. What they've done with the Katra, where somehow a person's Katra can span time and space instantaneously and, is faster than subspace communications. Okay, yeah, that's kind of bullshit. I mean, and in fact, you know what? All right, let's do this because I don't want this to be that long. So the article that came out, okay, from in Forbes was this. It's so bad. I'm not going to read the article here. I'm just going to tell you, basically what it was about. So the article is new Star Trek series makes massive science blunder. And pretty much the whole point of the article has to do with the tardigrade. Okay. So, you have the spore drive. If you haven't watched the show, I'm not going to explain it here. If you haven't watched the show, I told you, go watch the show first. Okay. You have the tardigrade, and the premise of why that giant tardigrade that powers the dash drive, like how it can do what it does with the spores and everything, is because of this concept of like horizontal gene transmission. Okay, where tardigrades, and it says it explicitly on the show Discovery, where tardigrades can consume or like take in parts of DNA of something else. Now, supposedly this concept has been scientifically, or apparently this has been scientifically debunked, that tardigrades do that. Okay, fine. But this guy makes this case saying this is such terrible science that they didn't know that this was a thing, that, he says he can't watch the show. And I'm just like, are you kidding? You're telling me you're okay with the transporter and you're freaking out about DGT or HGT or whatever? Yeah, horizontal gene transmission or whatever. Like, the transporter doesn't make any fucking sense. The transporter is completely impossible. It creates such ethical issues, to let alone scientific issues, that, okay, you got to beam somebody down, and, is that person actually the same person, or is it actually just a copy of that person? And then who actually has rights to exist if it's just a copy of the person? I mean, like, there's massive problems with this. Now, they admitted even in the article, like, this article is such PR stupidity. This is an absolute, like, attention grab. That's all it is. He's a fucking moron talking about the show and complaining about that one line about how the tardigrade works with. No, the biggest scientific blunder and ethical blunder that Star Trek does is the fucking transporter. Suspend your goddamn disbelief. So this is how things work in Star Trek. Fucking deal with it. Wow. Like, this guy needs, what the hell's his name? Fucking fillet this guy. Not fellatio, fillet him. Where the hell's his Steven Salzberg? This article just came out today, October 30th, 2017. Rip this guy a new one, because I mean, like, this argument smacks so much of all these people that are saying, "Oh, this doesn't feel like Star Trek. It's not real Star Trek. I don't like Discovery." Like it smack. This is I've never seen a worse argument for disliking Star Trek than that right there. Never. To say because it's based on an unscientific principle? Are you fucking kidding? Let's talk about the warp drive. Let's talk about the universal translator. Let's talk about how the universal translator somehow fucking works. Okay. Not that universal translators can't exist, but the way that they are just ever present on the show. Let's talk about that. How about, again, warp drive? I mean, there's a laundry list of things that we need to discuss. I mean, the fact that, whatever. There's so many things that we could go down that are much bigger problems than how a tardigrade sucks in DNA or that it doesn't. Fuck you. Wow. I mean, like, I can't, and because he's literally saying, because of this one thing, can the show survive? Well, fuck yes, it can. Who cares? They can come up they can come up with something else. They can come up with some other reason for why, what happens with the tardigrade happens. It could be the Q. I mean, there's, you could find out that that really the dash drive was actually being powered by one of the travelers, right? Like the guy from Tau Alpha C in Star Trek The Next Generation. Shut up. Wow. You can critique the show. There's plenty of critiques that I'll lay out about it too, but this is nonsense. This is fanboyism gone just dead wrong. Just absolutely dead wrong. I'm going to tweet at this guy as soon as I'm done recording this. But anyway, I'm feeding the troll. Yeah. So, okay. Now, where were we? So that's the kind of bullshit like marketing against Star Trek that's going on right now, which is just unbelievable to me to see. So yeah, I've been enjoying the show overall. I don't really have any issue with anything that's been laid out in it. I will talk about briefly so here's your spoiler alert. Okay, this is a spoiler that is a speculative spoiler that originally was being laid out. I think IO9 originally pushed this out there. And so here you go. This is it. Stop it now if you don't want to hear it. Okay, I gave you plenty of warning. So the idea is that Ash Tyler, the guy that was rescued by Captain Lorca aboard the Klingon ship where they met Harry Mudd, that Ash Tyler is actually Voq, that he's a Klingon spy. And there's a great argument being made for it. And there's, in fact, even just in last night's episode, in episode 7, where Stamets says, boy, you're really tall. Like he was almost freakishly tall, which Voq did look incredibly tall, quite frankly. But the idea that he's actually a Klingon spy, and who knows what the hell's going to happen there. Obviously, if he's in a relationship with Michael Burnham, he's going to get her to a point of weakness because, hey, Burnham's the one that killed T'Kuv Ma, and that's Voq's, prophet. That's his Jesus. So you're in a bit of trouble. But I got to admit, I think that this theory is very, very likely. In fact, it's in, I think it was episode 3 of this season. There's the point where you see at Lorca's desk, he has a Tribble. Now, if you watch if you watch The Trouble with Tribbles or Trials and Tribulations, I think they even showed the scene in that in DS9. You learn that Klingons and Tribbles don't get along. In fact, there's a holy war against the Tribbles because Tribbles will make this very loud sound and freak out whenever a Klingon's nearby. And I'm curious if at some point, because the relationship between Lorca and Ash Tyler is so tight and like deepening as well, along with Ash Tyler and Michael Burnham, that eventually he's going to bring bring Ash Tyler into his den of secrets, his little Dr. Moreau room there, and a Tribble's going to freak out on him. So, I can anticipate that happening because, again, we know that there's a Tribble on board, which I thought was weird. It's like, why bring on a Tribble? What the fuck? But that'll be a very, very nice touch. In fact, even in like the battle grids, the Space Station K7, where the whole episode Trouble with Tribbles happened, that's on like the space grid and everything. This is what I'm talking about. There's so much attention to detail of the Star Trek canon. I'm in awe that these people are saying this isn't Star Trek. Now, a complaint that I do have. So anyway, that's kind of a theory going around. It's an interesting one. Makes a lot of sense as to how all of this worked. I mean, everybody keeps talking about after everything you went through, and I mean, not to say that Voq didn't go through a traumatic thing, with perhaps becoming a human spy, much like the character in The Trouble with Tribbles. Same concept. Okay. So, I mean, it's believable. What would be really cool is if somehow they blamed it on the augment virus, or there was some control of the augment virus. That would be, which was, popularized in Enterprise. That could get pretty interesting and could start to explain why there's some Klingons that look so different, or why the Klingons look so different, in Discovery or something like that. If they want to play ball that way, not saying they have to, but I could see it happening. Anyway, here's a complaint. And I think this is the main reason that there's actually a mid-season break. I got to tell you, this is a gorgeous show, especially the first 2 hours were, like I said in my previous reviews, the most beautiful Star Trek, the most stunning Star Trek, like anywhere that you've ever seen. Just remarkable how good that looked. Even the starships looked way better than even the stuff done in the Kelvin timeline, in the Abrams verse. amazing. But after that, I mean, most of the effects look good, but you know what's weird? And I don't know why this seems to be so hard. The Discovery still looks like kind of like shit. And every time you see it, like space looks very hazy. Like everything looks really hazy. And I've downloaded, 1080p versions of this, of these episodes. And I have tried to get screenshots because I wanted a shot of the Discovery for, for my background on my computer. And I can't get a clean shot of this thing. Like, you can't get a single clean screenshot no matter what you do. And I think that this leads to, we've known, I mean, ever since they first showed, that quick clip of the Discovery coming out of dry dock. And now, of course, the ship looks completely different from that, or almost completely different from that. But it's based on designs by Ralph McQuarrie from back when they were doing, was it Planet of the Titans or something? It was, Star Trek Phase 2, part of that whole concept back until it ended up becoming Star Trek The Motion Picture. Again, so many of these design cues are coming from the 70s and 80s. I think they're still finishing kind of somehow, for some reason, they need to finish the effects on the Discovery. I think that's why we didn't see it in the first 2 episodes, because it was up to the minute trying to make this thing look good. And I don't understand what's so hard about that. It's almost weird. Just how not clean space, not just the Discovery, but how space looks around this thing. It's very strange, because otherwise this is gorgeous Trek. I mean, and I'm not even holding that against it. I'm just saying compared to the rest, and it just is kind of odd. This ship's really something. I mean, it almost looks like you're constantly watching a dream when you're looking at the Discovery from the outside, and they don't do half the kind of the pan and beauty shots that you normally get of starships that has become a standard for starships in Star Trek. For the past 20, 30 years. It's really kind of mind-boggling how that's working out. So I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what the deal is, but hey, it's really there. Now, another complaint that I have, not exactly a complaint, but it's not really a complaint. I just want to point out just how much this show is really borrowing from a lot of Star Trek traditions, just how Star Trek this really is. So again, I'm with everybody, or a lot of people anyway, in that, I'm not 100% pleased yet with how they're treating the Klingons. So, I mean, there's a lot of real concerns about sort of the racialism and other things that are being, engaged in with them and trying to be put on display that really kind of sets Star Trek back quite a bit. I understand those arguments. I do also understand that they are borrowing from very old ideas of Klingons. Particularly, there was the book from 1984 by John Ford, The Final Reflection, which, Star Trek novels up until, in fact, there's some argument about this, up until Discovery haven't been canon. But, for a while there, they did try to explore some pretty interesting concepts. Not all Star Trek books were that great, but some of the earlier ones I think were phenomenal. In fact, I'm going to tell you about what is really probably my favorite, next to what's called the Shatnerverse. What is my favorite, or what are my favorite Star Trek novels here in just a bit, just to give you something else besides talking about Discovery necessarily, even though I think it's totally relative to Discovery. But The Final Reflection from 84, which that has the Black Fleet. I mean, all of these different concepts that they are putting into with the Klingons. I mean, they just ripped it all right out of these pages, from this book, from 30 years ago, which I think is fine. I mean, that's nice to get into. I mean, because there's some brilliant ideas, when you think of Best Destiny, Probe, Spock's World, Prime Directive. I mean, there's so many Star Trek books that had so many brilliant little ideas. There's a lot of Star Trek books that were bullshit too. Don't misunderstand me, but there's a lot of them that, wow, did they do some cool shit. So there's a lot of borrowing from that. And, I was thinking about it, and I was realizing it because I actually went back. I wanted to reread The Final Reflection, and it just struck me that the concept of a Star Trek story not really being about the captain isn't new. it hit me. And I've talked about this before because I anytime that I've talked about Star Trek, I've said I really wish that these books would have been made canon, or that they would do something with the character and everything, because there's these really cool moments within them. And this was the 2 books done back in '86, done by Diane Carey, tremendous author. She's just amazing. She did, there was a 2-parter. I don't know if she ever did more than that, but Diane Carey's written a ton of Star Trek books, but I don't know, like these were like direct sequels to, or, they were related to each other. The first book was Dreadnought, and that's with an exclamation point at the end. And then the other book was what took place almost right after that, called Battle Stations with an exclamation point. Now, these 2 books had to do with a character named Lieutenant Piper. They never really give her first name. I don't think they did in Battle Stations. They definitely didn't in Dreadnought. And I haven't seen anybody else talk about this. Haven't seen it on Trek Core, Trek News. You go down the list, they haven't talked about this. But these books are in the rare book that, at least in Star Trek, where it's a first-person kind of perspective. And it's all being done through, kind of the eyes of Lieutenant Piper, who serves aboard the Enterprise. Now, these books are cool for a bunch of reasons. Okay, Lieutenant Piper is an awesome character, for one. The other cool thing about it is that you get like these kind of single-man fighters, as in starfighters, within Star Trek. They're kind of the first time you experience those in these 2 books. Also, one of the really cool things was, the Dreadnought class, which you kind of became a thing with the USS Vengeance in Star Trek Into Darkness, which of course is Kelvin timeline, not Prime timeline. These books are Prime timeline, even though they're not canon. But that's where you get the Constitution class ship that's huge and has like the 3rd nacelle. The whole idea of starships having a 3rd nacelle, like you saw the Enterprise D have and All Good Things, totally came from Diane Carey. Diane Carey is kind of borrowing from the Starfleet manual from the 70s too. But anyway, these books are so cool. They're a totally worthy read even to this day. And there's one of my favorite moments, maybe my favorite moment in Star Trek novels ever, that happens I think it was in Dreadnought, not in the beginning of Battle Stations, but where Captain Kirk he owns a boat, and he's out on that boat in the beginning of it, and he's out there with Spock and Lieutenant Piper, and the boat is named the Edith Keeler. And Lieutenant Piper, from her perspective, she has no idea who Edith Keeler is. Of course, we know her from City on the Edge of Forever. It's this lost love whole situation. And she just recognizes that there's a lot of pain around it with Kirk. And it's so beautiful. It adds on to that. Diane Carey was brilliant for bringing that in and having this boat named Edith Keeler. That's the scene in particular that I've talked about in the past where I was like, boy, these books are tremendous. So Dreadnought and Battle Stations, at the very least Dreadnought, you don't need Battle Stations, but Battle Stations is great too. It's probably my favorite Star Trek novel of all time. Next to, like I said, the Shatnerverse. Now, when you get into the Shatnerverse, Ashes of Eden, The Return, Avenger, and Spectre, you go to, there's a bunch of them. You go down the list of those. I love the whole Shatner universe. The Shatner universe, they're the set of novels that a lot of like Star Trek fan films and fan universes effectively have included as canon in their own canon, which I think is nice. And they do that because those books are so goddamn good. William Shatner just delivered, along with, of course, Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens. Just fantastic shit. So anyway, the Lieutenant Piper and Lieutenant Michael Burnham, I get, other than, Burnham being, having this Vulcan upbringing, very similar characters, very similar situation going on, including the fact that you have Dreadnought, which is like this super secret starship that's going to win a war against the Klingons. That's effectively Discovery. And the concept of like this rogue admiral and everything is very similar, of course, to Into Darkness, but that's an idea, this kind of Lorca-ish character was ripped right out of Diane Carey's works. So, they absolutely are pulling from Star Trek history. Canon or not, that's a different story, but they are pulling from Star Trek history, and very cool Star Trek history. There's a reason Diane Carey was allowed to do a sequel to Dreadnought, because it was such a popular book at the time. Nobody in the 80s was complaining that this wasn't Star Trek. These kinds of ideas. So, yeah, I think this is what we're really ending up with. And if you want hints as to what's going to happen perhaps in Discovery, I'd read those 2 books, and I bet you're going to end up with a pretty good idea of how this is all going to end up shaping up. And like I said, they're a totally fucking worthy read. I mean, they're just fantastic. So anyway, so there you go. Those are my favorite Star Trek novels. Of course, Desperate Hours will easily go. I mean, goes way up. Definitely in my top 10 Star Trek novels of all time. Like I said, I'm really excited, and I plan on doing a review for the November Star Trek update. They have the first book of the Star Trek Prometheus series, which has to do with the USS Prometheus, which is that badass ship that we learned about in Voyager, that can split into like 4 ships. Just so wild. I can't wait for that. We'll definitely be talking about that, and getting reviews in there, and maybe we'll get into some comic book reviews as well. Now, something else I wanted to tell you about was, and I actually purchased this and I gave it a listen and I liked it a lot. One thing I'm kind of shocked with Discovery is that there isn't. And they haven't usually, I mean, before the show even comes out, usually we get a release of a soundtrack, at least for the first episode or something. And not that I have a problem with, with the soundtrack that's out there, or with the music that's out there, the music that you hear kind of in the background, and it's almost been an afterthought, minus the theme by Jeff Rousseau. But Jeff Rousseau's work, or Rousseau, I guess I should say, it's not Rousseau like a French name, but Jeff Rousseau's work has been great. I mean, it's served. I haven't heard anybody really complain about the music. The opening theme, you get used to it. It's underwhelming. I complained about it. It has the Game of Thrones tinge, but you get used to it and you kind of end up liking it, and it has the Alexander Courage cues in it from the original series, which is nice. But we don't have an official album release yet. And I'm kind of disappointed by that, probably because the album titles would give something away somehow. I mean, this has been a popular thing. I mean, this used to be a thing. Like, even Star Wars is bullshitting us with this now. To where usually you can find out the track listing will leak ahead of time, but now they're not releasing the soundtrack until the day that the movie comes out. As to where before, like when episode 1 came out, we got the soundtrack a month in advance. It was about a month in advance. I remember it was May 2nd, 1999. And I'm kind of disappointed. I mean, like, I like listening to the soundtrack ahead of time because it gets you hyped up, just like with Blade Runner 2049. I got to listen to the soundtrack ahead of time. Good thing I did, because some of the experiences varied within the theater itself on that. But, listen to Raw just as an album. The soundtrack for 2049 by Hans Zimmer was fantastic. Which, by the way, pick up Hans Zimmer's Live in Prague album that just came out last week. Holy shit. Knocked me on my ass, especially when they started playing Crimson Tide. Just fantastic. So, okay, I'm saying fantastic way too much. My apologies. So what we did get, ironically, is a release of alternative music. What happened is, again, one day we're going to get the story around the pre-production and production of Star Trek Discovery, because it's obviously been a roller coaster. Back when Brian Fuller was more involved with it, Brian Fuller was interested in bringing on Cliff Idleman. Now, Cliff Idleman, if you don't know, Cliff Idleman did the score, the incredible score. I mean, like, really, like, action-packed, unique score for Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, of course, which was the return of Nick Meyer, who did Star Trek II. Star Trek VI, very underrated score, and a movie that doesn't get talked about enough because it's such solid Star Trek. It's so cool. But Cliff Idleman's score definitely doesn't get the love it deserves, because it really delivered. And he was apparently Brian Fuller, probably because Nick Meyer was involved also with Discovery. Brian Fuller wanted to bring on Cliff Idleman as a potential composer. And so, Brian Fuller said, "Hey, Cliff, make us some music and we'll tell you what we think." And so he made a theme. And then he not only made a theme, like he sent it to him, he didn't really hear back, but he kept making music, which is a pretty good work ethic, right? It's like, well, if I just keep going, if I put in a little extra, maybe they'll hire me. Well, they didn't end up using Cliff Idleman, sadly, but they did use Jeff Russo. But what Cliff Idleman composed for Discovery, he just released as a 4-track EP. That it's called Into the Unknown, and you can buy this. It's on Google Play Music. It's on Spotify as well. But wherever you end up purchasing music, I'm sure Amazon Music has it as well. And it's pretty cool. Like, in fact, the theme, I like Cliff Idleman's work better than anything I've been hearing on Discovery. Not that what's been on Discovery has been bad, just Cliff Idleman, obviously, he has it going on. I mean, if you've never heard his work, he did back in the 90s, he did a CD that was a compilation of the Alien trilogy. And it's beautiful. It's one of the best ways to listen to that music outside of the complete scores that have come out from like Entrada for Alien and Aliens, or maybe it was La La Land. No, I think Entrada did those, or Vri Sarabande, whoever put them out there. But anyway, he did release this. I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to get your hands on it. But I listened to all 4 tracks, and it's short. I mean, and it only costs like $4. But I think it's totally worth it. I think it's very enjoyable, and it's music that I actually might integrate into other things, just because I thought it was so well done. So yeah, I mean, good for you, Cliff Idleman, rock and roll. And I think he's done a few other things like that recently as well. So, okay, so just putting that out there. Now, the next thing I want to get into is have a little fun, and then we'll wrap this baby up. IO9 did a very funny, this is from September 12th, 2017. It's this list of, this is the title of their story. This list of the most rewatched Star Trek episodes is baffling. So this is interesting. They pretty much took this from Netflix, and they got a ranking of what are the most watched episodes of Star Trek of any of the series on Netflix. Now they said that they didn't include these in the, they had a full list. They said that the first episodes for each series, for example, Encounter at Farpoint or Caretaker, or Emissary, for DS9, that those are far and away, like by a long shot, the most watched episodes of any series. And so they didn't break that down, like they didn't include this in their ranking. But I thought their ranking was very, very interesting from what they had. And it's kind of more telling of I think it's telling of what's watched and some of what isn't there. Because the most watched episodes, ironically, usually aren't what most Star Trek fans or even TV Guide or whoever else is counting consider Star Trek's best work. So here's a top 10 list of, on Netflix, what are the most rewatched episodes. Again, discounting the pilot episodes for every series, because those won like just handily. So here we go. Number 1 was Endgame. Parts 1 and 2. That's the series, not season, the series finale for Voyager. I mean, hey, look, I thought it was awesome too. I'd rewatch that. I have rewatched it a million times. But that's number 1. That's interesting. Let's go down the list and then we'll talk about it. Number 2 and number 3, I don't know why they broke them down as number 2 and number 3, because they gave Endgame parts 1 and 2 as one slot. But anyway, number 2 and number 3 were Best of Both Worlds, part 1 and 2. That should, I can't believe that that's not number 1. I can't believe Endgame is, but it's interesting that that's not number 1, certainly, because most people consider that to be like the best Star Trek ever, not counting, say, The Inner Light or City on the Edge of Forever. Number 4 and number 5, it's another two-parter with number 4 and number 5, Scorpion, which of course is the episode of Voyager where we get 7 of 9. Makes sense that gets watched a lot. 7 of 9 was a tremendous character, certainly very sexy, but also, very deep character in her own right. Without the, she didn't even really need, the look that she would end up developing, or that they planned on, really. The next one from Voyager was The Gift, and then that's number 6. Then number 7 from Voyager is Dark Frontier, parts 1 and 2. Another fantastic one to put out there. That's when kind of the Borg Queen returned, right, in Voyager. It makes a lot of sense that that's there. Number 8 was Q-Who, which, of course, is from the second season of The Next Generation. That's the first time that the Borg appeared. Then there's number 9 was Time and Again, which I think Time and Again was the episode, I think that's the one with Sulu, which that would make a ton of sense if it was that episode. But I could be totally, I think I'm totally wrong about that. But anyway, Time and Again was number 9, and then number 10 was Clues for The Next Generation. Now, some of those, like The Gift and Clues, like those are sort of weird to have those be kind of at the top of the list. I mean, like that's very, those are very strange. And again, it's very strange that City on the Edge of Forever, and certainly that The Inner Light didn't make the top 10. That's remarkable. Or say Yesterday's Enterprise should easily be a top 10 episode. I mean, I can think of so many episodes that deserve to be in the top 10. The Maquis two-parter could certainly fit in the top 10. And I'm not even saying like based upon what my favorites are. I'm just saying straight up, those should be in the top 10. Measure of a Man from, second season, the classic court drama where his Data, does he have rights? I mean, this is high-end stuff. I can't believe that these aren't the most watched. But there is a theme here, admittedly. And I'm sure you've already figured out what the theme is. All of these are or almost all of these, 4/5 of them are about the Borg. It's all about the Borg. And that kind of makes sense. So then the list actually it's not baffling at that point, because then what did people want to know? Okay, they watched Best of Both Worlds. Then they wanted to find out, hey, wait a minute, what happened with the Borg? Was there any more about this? Does this go further? And they didn't even go into movies. I'm sure First Contact is probably the most watched movie. So it just goes to show the Borg are a really, really big deal. And at some point, I imagine Discovery I'm just waiting for the episode where the dash drive puts the Discovery in the middle of the Delta Quadrant and they encounter the Borg. Because there's kind of a hint, especially in Best of Both Worlds, where it seems like Starfleet sort of, because you knew about that they were attacking the Romulans and all that, and you got hints of that in the first season of The Next Generation. But there seems to be this idea that Starfleet sort of knows about the Borg. And of course, the Borg are somewhat encountered in Enterprise. So I think that this would make sense, and that Section 31 maybe would keep it quiet, because, again, I think that at the end of the day, Discovery is going to be a Section 31 show, which is totally fine with me. That's A-okay. So, but I thought that was a fascinating list. Amazing. The game's not on there. Which is probably shy of my favorite episode of Star Trek ever. The game from Star Trek: The Next Generation from season 5, when you have Ashley Judd and Wesley comes back and everybody's getting mind controlled by that game. Boy, just makes you think of smartphones, doesn't it? No. Anyway, I thought that list was fascinating, but I think at some point Discovery, if they want to take it over the top, and save it for season 2, but if they want to take it over the top, bring the Borg on, and everybody is just going to, they're going to flock and watch, because people just clearly go nuts. Even as Voyager, because, you talk to most Star Trek fans, they don't give a shit about Voyager. Like they usually hate it. But no, if it's got Borg involved, oh yeah, I'll watch that, right? That's how a lot of your not so hardcore Star Trek fans feel. And I think that top 10 list really shows that, as far as the metrics on Netflix. Boy, this is a side thing. The amount of metrics and data and metadata that Netflix has on people don't talk about it. They're always talking about Facebook and Google. There's a lot to be said about, the amount of data that Netflix collects, and they keep that really, really, really close to the vest. And so I'm actually shocked that you're sort of able to collect that data to find out, what Star Trek shows are happening. And, this is interesting, too. This is another theory that I've heard recently about Discovery and why Discovery is never going to stop. Supposedly, Netflix is actually funding Discovery, the entire show, Star Trek Discovery. And CBS, they make pure profit on their all access service. And that's why they're willing to go forward with it, because Netflix, they have, other than America, if you want to watch Star Trek Discovery, the only place you watch it, obviously other than torrents, is on Netflix. So really, it's a Netflix show. Just nobody knows it, which you can read up about this. It's pretty interesting how this is working. So CBS is all on board, and they're trying with all access and everything, and they are laughing all the way to the bank, because they're not putting up any money for it. It's Netflix's purse that's kind of on the line here. But as far as I know, it's doing very, very well. So CBS is like, oh yeah, sure, season 2, great, whatever. They don't care. So that's a fascinating. Even the politics around that alone, would really be just an amazing story to hear. But yeah, how do I feel about Discovery overall so far? Phenomenal. I'm loving every minute of it, and I'm watching these episodes over and over again, and they are absolutely entertaining. Captain Lorca is probably my favorite character right now. I know everybody loves Stamets, and I get that. A lot of people really like Burnham. Yep, that's cool. And Tilly, and hey, rock and roll, man. That's great. But I am loving Lorca, and I can't believe that they killed off that security chief, like inside of like 4 episodes. She was gone. It was just over. I was like, wow. I mean, not that that's some kind of new precedent. Obviously, we lost Tasha Yar in season 1 of The Next Generation, but that was crazy because they were, what was nuts about that? And at some point, I'll talk more about this because that guy, Aaron Herbert's one of the producers. I don't like this guy. When he's on After Trek, I get a very, very creepy vibe from him. I don't like him at all. But they were saying on After Trek before the episode that this the woman security chief died off, that she's like in love with Lorca. They have this very deep relationship and everything, and we never got to explore that. What the fuck? Maybe they're going to talk about. I don't believe that they will, but maybe they're going to talk about it. There is the second Discovery book, which is kind of canon. What they're saying is they're canon until they're not, but they're calling them tie-ins. They want to use the word tie-in instead of canon, which that's the closest we've ever got to having canon Star Trek books, by the way. Minus there was the one Borg story that Brandon Braga wrote, not Dark Frontier. Oh, fuck. I've mentioned it before, and now I can't think of it. That has to do with like the end of the Borg, and Brandon Braga said, no, this is, and Berman apparently came out and said, no, this is canon. But anyway, this is the closest we've ever got to having like canon tie-in stuff. But there's another tie-in novel coming out in February of 2018, and this one's going to have to do with Lorca. Captain Kirk's going to be in it. It looks like a fascinating story. Maybe we'll get more of our sadly dead female security officer from the Discovery. But anyway, I mean, I don't know. After Trek, I kind of like it, and they explain some things here and there, but there's times where they're being like really misleading as far as what's going on. I don't know. There's it's kind of a double-edged sword with After Trek, but I watch it every week, so whatever. Anyway, yeah, I'll be excited for when that novel comes out in February, and I think November is when the comic book series, one of the comic books mini-series or something for Discovery starts up. I'll definitely review that when that comes out, and I'll get a date on that. Another one I think that's coming out in November that I'm looking forward to is they have that kind of gender bender Star Trek comic coming out where it's a female Spock, a female Kirk, and everything. Like it's just an alternate universe where they're female, and I think that's so cool and frankly hot and wonderful. I can't wait to read that. They already released the cover for it, and I think they said November is when it would start. And also in November we'll probably cover, I think Broken Mirror will finally come full circle, or Mirror Broken, not Broken Mirror, Mirror Broken, which is the Next Generation Mirror universe story that has been awesome so far, but we'll give a full review when that's finished. So lots of Star Trek to talk about throughout November, no doubt about that. So be waiting for that, and of course your Star Wars update will be coming out tomorrow after you hear this. So I will see you on the other side. Tons of other content coming out too, baby. Thank you so much to all the patrons. Thank you for everybody that sticks with me, every month, because there's a lot of stuff. There's things I haven't even told you about that are going to be coming, and plenty of stuff that I have told you about that are definitely coming. So I'll see you on the other side.